Travis, welcome to Upreneur. How you doing?
Jeremy, what's up, man? Happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I was getting to look a little bit at Guestio and a little bit about the company, and obviously you are in the podcast game, so you got me on my toes here, sitting here talking to you.
Hey, happy to be here, man. Happy to be here and try to add a little bit of value and just have a fun conversation. So I appreciate it.
Well, before we jump into Guestio and a little bit about your company, why don't you just talk us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey? You're a young guy, and it looks like you've had your hands in reading your bio, a number of different businesses from an early age. Was it something that your family got you into the entrepreneur side? Was it something you think right in the beginning you just had an interest as a kid? Because I know in reading your bio, you actually started at a young age with businesses.
Yeah, that's something I've tried to ask myself because people try to reverse engineer how they got to where they are, and me being in the content creation space, it's something that's come up a lot, and so I try to really ask myself that question. And it's interesting because I grew up in like a really strict religious bubble. I call it a bubble because I can't bring myself to call it a cult because I don't think it is a cult, but definitely a bubble. I graduated kindergarten and college on the same campus.
Okay.
So like literally 20 plus years of my life was lived on this one 20 to 40 acre campus, basically 7 days a week. And so in that culture, they're very much against encouraging you to go be an entrepreneur. You know what I mean? His money is bad for the majority of, for all intents and purposes. Really, the money is bad until you have money, and then they want you to give them their money. You know what I mean? Um, yeah. So anyway, so I had that, but then also my dad was in real estate. He was a real estate agent basically my whole life growing up. And so I think that he kind of would see hints of entrepreneurial tendencies in me, and he would always encourage them. And I think that he did a really great job of at least having conversations with me to know that if I truly wanted to pursue any other path, that I was capable of doing that. But I don't ever remember them introducing it to me. And my sister is 18, 19 months older than I am, so we grew up very much the same way. And she's not in entrepreneurship at all. She's a teacher. So there's, I think that some of it was kind of hardwired in me. And as soon as I graduated college and figured out that I didn't want to be a minister anymore, that was kind of the only path that was left on the table for me.
So I grew up in a religious family also. My sister ended up a youth minister in a Catholic church, and I ended up in sales somehow. I always
Yeah.
say it kind of weighs each other out at that
That
point.
was
But
basically what it was. Yeah. She went into teaching and I went into door-to-door sales. So very similar.
my father was in the car business, ended up owning a couple car dealerships, but worked his way up from selling cars and doing it. And there's a lot of things I know he did to encourage me into the entrepreneurship side. I'm curious on what your dad did here for the parents that are listening here. What did your father do to help encourage it? You mentioned that earlier.
I just remember having conversations with him a bunch. Like if I brought it up, he would at least encourage those dreams or goals, or take the time to write stuff down with me or picture something or whatever it was. He would incentivize working around the house and stuff. Like if I wanted extra money to go buy something, they wouldn't just buy it for me. They would make me go work for it. And I think that was a really important step of the process. Even though I was doing, manual labor, it was still the concept of if you have something you want, if you have a goal in mind, you can go achieve that goal if you're willing to put in the work that merits the achievement. And I think that just that principle by itself was something that stuck with me for a long time as well.
So tell me a little bit about how you parlayed that to the idea of content creation, business in Guestio, and a little bit about what Guestio is, as people are trying to gauge from the name of what the company actually does.
Sure. So I really just kind of fell into it because I grew up super religious. The only real path or career path that they really talked to you about growing up was ministry. And so I ended up in the ministerial college that was on the campus. It was like less than 1,000 student college that was on the same campus as the church and the high school that I graduated from and elementary school that I graduated from, all on the same campus. And so By the time I graduated college, realized I didn't really want to be doing this full time, the ministry thing full time. So I didn't have any real skills. I was obviously, fresh out of college. I had gotten married before I graduated. So I'm fresh out of college and I have a wife, and my degree is in Bible and church ministries, double majored in Bible and church ministries, which I don't know if you've tried to get a job with a degree in Bible and church ministries, but it's not really something they're looking for on the application, especially,
That was actually my sister's degree, and she had that exact issue.
Yeah, right.
Minister.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and it happened to be an unaccredited college, which made it even worse, So I didn't have a degree. I didn't have any real skills to fall back on, except for in college, I started doing door-to-door sales just to make extra money while I was going to school. And I started just doing really well with it. I got promoted 2 or 3 times in my first 2 months, 3 months on the job. So got promoted to the point where I was a full-time employee working with this solar company, selling door to door and running my own team of people. Then the school year started up again. I started recruiting a bunch of kids from the college to come knock with me. And then before you know it, we were running a team of like 15 to 20 guys and doing a ton of volume in solar, and was making some decent money as a college student. And when I graduated, it was just kind of like, well, what else am I going to do? Like, I'm not going to go get some 30K a year desk job if I can go work a 9 to 5, if I can go work in 100% commission sales and make 3 or 4 times that on my own schedule in 20 hours a week or whatever. So I just kind of fell into door to door. But the problem with that is that after I kind of achieved what I was hoping to achieve that first year, which was a 6-figure income, I realized that I didn't want to do that any longer either, and it wasn't, I didn't want to do it ever again. It was just like, I know that if I fast forward when I'm 33 years old, I don't want to be doing this. When I'm 43 years old, I don't want to be doing this. And not to even talk crap about the door-to-door industry. I have a ton of friends who make a lot of money going door-to-door and have a great lifestyle and love it. It just wasn't for me. And I had that clarity by doing it for a few years at that point. And I had no idea, again, what I was going to do. That was really like the back against the wall moment for me, Jeremy, because at that point, not only was my degree a dead end, but the only thing that I knew how to do was also a dead end. So now I'm 23. We bought a house, so I had a mortgage to pay. I had a wife. I couldn't just go, move back in with mom and dad and sleep on the couch until I figure it out. I had bills to pay. I was a real, I had real responsibilities. And so that was like,
for real.
What's that?
You were actually adulting. You were being an adult.
Yeah, right. Like an actual adult. Yeah. No monthly support checks from grandparents or anything like that. Yeah. Just kind of had to figure it out. And so I knew enough to know that as a millennial, so I'm a millennial, I'm 28. As a millennial, I knew that business was trending toward being all online, and had enough foresight to be like, look, if I'm going to learn anything, if I'm going to learn any skill that is going to be a profitable career path for me, it's probably something to do with doing business online in some context or capacity. The problem was I just didn't have any idea how to do that or how to get started doing it. And so I started just searching for information and found some books, some audiobooks, and for the first time ever started listening to podcasts. And because I'm not I never really enjoyed reading before. I forced myself to read a good amount, but I still just really preferred the podcast medium. So I started consuming a bunch of podcasts. And then after a while I was just like, man, this seems like a pretty cool way to make a living if you can make it happen. I followed a couple people that would make 7 figures, multi 7 figures on the back of a podcast, just creating content and interviewing interesting people. And I was like, that sounds like both of things that I'm willing to do and need to do, because I didn't have any network at all at that point. I didn't know anybody that was doing any big numbers in business. I'd never even met a millionaire, let alone had a personal relationship with one that could actually help me figure out how to get to that point. So I just kind of full-fledged jumped into podcasting once I figured out that was kind of the path that I wanted to go down.
So let's kind of backpedal a little bit into the story. So, you took a sales job where you start to see the communication skills are important. The door-to-door sales is obviously a very hard way to start sales. Now, it's even worse than cold calling. At least you can't see the person. And when you start cold calling, the phone feels pretty heavy anyway, let alone having to go walk to the door and knock on the door. Um, what kind of gave you the ability to do that as an early on? Was it just your only option? Was it, you wanted to challenge yourself? Because I often tell people your first job you should take out of college is a sales job. Because no matter what type of career you're going to get into, you're going to have to effectively communicate with people and you're going to have to learn to deal with rejection. And so you might as well learn the skill sets from that. So talk me through a little bit about why you would do that in college and then how some of those skill sets has translated to you being a CEO and running a business?
Money. That's the real answer. I just saw opportunity, like all my other friends were getting jobs where they're paying $10 an hour was good. And this is in California. And even back then, I think minimum wage was like $8.50 an hour or something like that. And so like my friends that were making $10 an hour was like, wow, you're making $10 an hour. But I was running a landscaping business at the time. And I was paying somebody else in the college to do all of the work in the business for me. And I was making like 500 to $1,000 a month doing basically nothing in my landscaping business. So when I was looking at my friends that were working for $10 an hour at like 30 hours a week on top of going to school full time, and they were taking home, $1,300 a month. I was like, why in the hell would I do that when I have this like little landscaping thing? I'm not planning on doing this stuff for the rest of my life. I just want to make some extra money while I'm in college. So then I saw this door-to-door thing pop up, and my friends were actually making some decent money doing this. Like, oh, you made like $1,000 last week. Like, that's actually like that's a good amount of money, if in 20, 25 hours, that's kind of unheard of for a 19-year-old, 20-year-old.
Yeah.
And so I just saw opportunity and potential and jumped in. And I'm pretty hyper competitive, and I don't like to lose. And so I just kind of jumped in. I knew that a bunch of my peers were doing the same thing I was doing, and I frankly wanted to win and outperform everybody, which is what I was able to do.
I love also, I talked a little bit about leverage in the landscaping business. And it's one of those things that I think an entrepreneur has to learn quickly is that if you have systems and processes and other people helping you run the business, you can make tweaks and make a lot more money than opposed to just having to go work more hours. And I remember, early on in high school, my father was telling me he had the car dealership, but one of it was a service department. And he was talking about if he raised the rates in the service department by like $2 an hour, he's not going to lose people that want to do service, but he'd make a couple $100,000 more a month. Like, that just hit me. And I'm like, wow, wait, what am I doing? Grinding away every day, having to work the hour. And I was in college, so I'm, working in a call center, learning and trying to get comfortable on the phones.
Right.
And it made me realize, though, that I got to think a little bit more about leverage and scale than opposed to just trying to put more hours in to make more money. And it kind of got me down that route of really entrepreneurship. You mentioned something also before that you saw yourself not doing door to door for a while, and it's kind of what led you to running your company right now. I think the hard part about sales, especially if it's cold calling door to door, is you start to lose your intellectual stimulation because it comes repetitive. When you get really good at it, you got the scripts down, you know how to handle the objections, you know how to sit there and talk to people, you know your products are well. You can make a lot of money, but the sexiness of it kind of fades. And for someone that wants that type of intellectual stimulation, you have to look at some other places. So walk me through a little bit more of what Guestio actually does.
Sure. So Guestio basically came out of the podcasting world. So I started my podcast called Build Your Network, and immediately my biggest thing was I knew that I needed to create quality content. But I also knew that I sucked as a content creator because I'd never done it in my life. And so I knew that, like, even if I think I'm sounding pretty good, I'm probably not sounding very good. And the only way that I knew how to build quality content when I wasn't going to be the one providing it was to go get quality people who were really good at this and ask them questions. And it just kind of made logical sense to me. So I went out and started just trying to get the best guests I could possibly get on my show, and started making some big traction with that. And through that, ultimately, a lot of podcasting friends started kind of reaching out to me and just being like, hey, how did you get that person on? Or I saw that you had this person on as a guest. How did you get in front of them? We've been trying to get a hold of them for 7 months. And we can't get anything. How'd you get in touch with them? So we started building trainings on like, oh, how to do this, how to do that, how to start doing those little things with podcasting or whatever, which led to podcast coaching. We have a podcast course, podcast community, teaching entrepreneurs how to build podcasts, how to get good guests on their show, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is getting good guests on your show really just takes a lot of persistence, a lot of hard work, and a lot of time. And most people, especially if you're a busy, successful entrepreneur, you don't have as much time as I did back then, because at the time I was podcasting on the side, trying to get that going. And I was still doing door to door, for 15, 20 hours a week just to sell deals and pay my bills. and pay for the podcasting hobby type thing. And so that's kind of what ended up leading into Guestio, was that, at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of hard work, a lot of persistence. And so we, instead of just building a training that teaches people how to do it, we were like, let's build a tool that makes this process way easier and way more efficient, where people can log on if they want to interview a really high quality guest that they know would take a year to get in touch with, or 6 introductions, or, a workaround around their gatekeeper that keep getting stopped by. They can go to Guestio and they can pay that person directly to be a guest on their show. Just like you can pay, a celebrity to say happy birthday to your mom on Cameo for $500, you can come to Guestio, and instead of paying for a 30-second happy birthday shout out, you can pay for a 30-minute interview on your content channel. So that's kind of where the idea came from. It was born out of necessity.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, it's for the most part, if I look at the guests on our podcast, it's usually people I know, friends. Somehow I got connected with them and know them from a business perspective, and they're influential in the community. And I'm using my relationships, but it's hard to build, systems and processes. It's like I met somebody and I just kind of bring it up to them, going, "Hey, why don't you come on the show?" Then opposed to a repeatable system that you kind of build for, especially people that might not have the network.
Right.
Which kind of leads me into one of the questions you ask on your podcast is it who you know or what you know? I'm actually curious on your answer for that.
Yeah, sure. So it's a question that, it's funny because when I first was doing interviews, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I just wrote out a bunch of questions that I was going to ask people. It's so bad. Like if you go back and listen to my first few episodes, it's so bad because I just like would ask a question and then they would say their answer and I'd be like, yeah, cool. So, and then I move into the next question, and one of the questions that I had was who you know or what you know. And I put it first in my show outline because I thought that I'd always heard that phrase growing up, oh, who you know is more important than what you know, because you always hear it usually in a negative context where it's like somebody got beat out for this job that they were in line for because that person knew the hiring manager or whatever. And it's like, oh, who you know. But I always found it fascinating that person would just complain about the fact that they knew that person instead of them trying to go out and build relationships with people who were decision makers. But that's besides the point. So I would ask that question at the beginning because I thought that basically everybody would say who you know, and then I'd be like, yeah, that's what I think too, and then we'd have a great conversation about networking or relationships. Right. But what I ended up finding was that I started getting mixed answers for that question. So it kind of ended up becoming the staple question on the show. And out of all of the questions that I had originally written down on that first interview, worksheet or rundown, that's the only one that's made it through all of our 600 plus episodes, is the who you know or what you know. And so asked a ton of people that question. And so my thought is still who you know, but I have kind of different reasoning for it now. So I think that it's who you know, because your what will always increase exponentially by your who, and I don't necessarily find it being true the other way around. Your who will not increase exponentially because of your what, unless your what is amazing, right? Like if you're Mark Zuckerberg and your what is specializing in building Facebook, he can meet anybody in the entire world that he wants to meet because his what is that good. But that's just very few and far between. And so the more duplicatable, repeatable thing is to get to know a ton of people that know a ton of things and get around those people and learn from them. And the first time I can remember just like visualizing what this really meant was a simple illustration, but it was playing ping pong growing up. And again, I'm really competitive, and so my dad bought a ping pong table because he played a bunch in college, and so we started playing ping pong. And at first, I was just I just get crushed. He would just beat me every single time. I don't know. I was maybe 13, something like that. I was pretty young, maybe junior high when we got it. And we started playing and he just beat me so bad every time. But it probably took me like a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe when I was like 14 or 15. And I beat him for the first time. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. And then he started getting a little bit more serious about playing me and started realizing like, oh, he's getting better at this. And so we started playing a bunch. And then I when I look back on that, what's super weird to me is like the exponential growth that happened from the period of me starting playing ping pong until I got as good as good as my dad at it was such a short, compressed period of time in comparison to how much better I got at it after I was already as good as my dad, which is the answer still to this day is I never got better. Like to this day, if me and my dad play, it'll be whichever one of us is having a better game, basically.
Yeah.
And so when I look at that and examine, I'm like, man, well, if I got that much better that quickly, what stopped? Why did I stop getting better? And the answer is that I didn't have anybody to play with that was better than my dad. I didn't know anybody else that I could go play with every Friday night or whatever. So like me and him could get better by playing each other, but only incrementally better,
Yeah.
not exponentially better. Right. So it's, and again, I know that there's different nuances and things, but that's just a simple illustration to say like why I'm saying this answer is that I just find that if you get around the right who, if you find the right people who've been there, done that, walked the path before you in the area that you're trying to be successful in, right? Again, there's lots of caveats and nuances to this, but I'm saying if you get around somebody who's mastered the craft that you are trying to become successful in, there is no way that you will not improve, get better at an exponential rate if you're trying at all. Obviously, there's still going to be work. You can't just like go hang out with that person and drink a beer and watch them and not do any of the stuff that they're doing, right? Like the implementation and the what comes along with it. But the who I find is always going to exponentially increase the what if you can get around the right people.
No, I love that analogy that you gave, because oftentimes people will stick with a mentor their whole time period, maybe 5, 10 years, and opposed to trying to find mentors that might have you improve in different areas. And there's a part of a loyalty piece to it, but there's a part that they start to get comfortable and they lose that exponential growth. It's interesting. When I was in high school, I was in all honors classes, smart kid. But my dad, who was more of a communication guy, a sales guy, and he's like, Jeremy, you're not involved in anything. You're not hanging out, but you got to learn how to work with people. And he had me starting reading books on just how to better communicate, how to build a network, all the basic ones everybody says, how to influence people, all the books that you try to read right when you're first starting to get in your career. But it's made a world of difference in my career. If I look back, one of the largest reasons I think I grew faster than other people, whether I was in my executive role with a Fortune 500 company, or whether it's me running businesses now, I always kept 3 mentors. And the way that I would do it is I would have one mentor that was in my job that was a lot better than me, and I would work with them until I caught up with them. I would have another mentor that was in a role that was much higher than mine to get their perspective, but still in the same industry and knows everything about what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then third, I would have a mentor that was outside the industry that would have a completely different perspective. And what I would do is I would ask them, I'd like to work with you for 6 months, 30 minutes a month. I'm going to come to you with questions. I'll send you ahead of time. You can look at it. And I'll give you a recap afterwards of exactly what I did from the advice you gave me. And what I would do is I would ask those 3 people, all different backgrounds, the same questions. And it would give me perspective based on their experiences, but it allowed me to make really good decisions. And because I did it at 6-month increments, if I felt like I learned already from them, it wasn't a bad thing for me to walk away to go find somebody else to get that exponential growth. I was able to do that in a way that wasn't offensive. And then if it was somebody that I actually was still learning a lot from, then I would actually continue to work with them. And if I look back, I probably only had 3 mentors in my career that I kept longer than 6 months. You can get a lot of information that you need for yourself. Doesn't mean that they don't have other stuff to give, but for what you need for your growth, you can get it out of a short-term period. It's just a matter of then finding the next person to help you develop and grow.
Always leveling up. Yep.
Yep.
That's the whole key.
So networking is a big piece of what your podcast talked about, and kind of how you've built through on the who. Can you help people understand how to find the who? A lot of people that are starting out a business, they don't even know where to go. It's how do I find somebody to mentor me, or how do I find somebody just to go pick their brain once, or how do I even the right podcast to listen to? Because there's so many podcasts out there that you want the right information coming into your head, and not one that might be some type of hack or something like that might not be the right influence to do it. Any advice you would give on trying to find the right people to influence you at the right time?
Sure. So first off, commit to the long term, because there's a lot of bad information out there, and odds are if you're actively seeking out people who are going to give you information, you're going to come across a couple people who you end up getting information from that you find out later wasn't good information. And you got to just be okay with that. I know a lot of people that just swear off that entire thing because they got screwed over by one person. So like, oh, I had a coach once, or I had a mentor once and this happened, so never again. And it's like, whoa. You can't, like you can't throw the baby out the bathwater in that scenario. Like that's why I say first off, commit long term, because you have to be committed to being successful in whatever it is. Because if you end up having one of those types of bad stories, then you're just going to be like, all right, cool. What can I take away from that? What can I learn from that? How can I avoid this again in the future? Let's go find somebody else. You know what I'm saying? So that's the first thing. In terms of trying to find the right people and avoid that scenario from happening at all, which is obviously the preferable case. For me, it was always a matter of access and proximity to those people, and then proving my worth in those situations, meaning that people who are successful get a bad rap from culture and society because they get portrayed as these like greedy, selfish type people that, they just want to make money and they're not about helping people and they're just greedy and they love money more than people and blah, blah, blah. But I've actually found the opposite to be true. The majority of people that I know that make a lot of money, it's typically because they live in an abundance mindset and they're happy to share. They're happy to give. They want to help other people. They want to pay it forward to people that are coming behind them, and they want to help people up. But most people are not putting themselves in a position to be helped. Most people won't do the work if they get some advice. So like that to me is the big thing that you should focus on if you're listening to this and you want to go get a mentor. Try to think about, hey, what would this person have done if they were me? What type of mindset did they have when they were my age or they were at my stage in business? And how can I get them to see a little glimpse of themselves in what I do? And that has been a huge help for me, because I think that that's the reason that people want to pour into me, because they're making a bet on my future. You know what I mean? They're not investing their money, but they're investing their time into me. And that's definitely an investment. Any busy person, any successful person knows that money is not our most valuable asset in life. Time is. Money is by definition replenishable. Time is not. So when you have a mentor that's willing to invest time in you, that's a really big deal. And again, that's why they have a bad rep, because people, will just be like, well, it's only 10 minutes of your time. You know what I mean? Why is it such a big deal? You won't get on a call with me, or you won't let me pick your brain. Like, you got to understand that they understand that time is their most valuable asset. So they can't just give it away freely to everybody. You have to prove to them why you're worth investing, that it's an investment of their time into you. And so that's something that I've really worked hard to build. And it didn't, take for the first year or first, year and a half or however long it was. But when I continued to build my reputation and get around those people and prove that if you invest time with me, it's going to pay off for you. Like I'm going to do the things that you tell me to do. I don't know how many people have DM'd me and gotten free advice from me, especially when I was first getting started, because I was just stoked people were asking me for advice, and I would take a bunch of time with them and tell them this thing and that thing. And then 6 months later, they hit me up again. They didn't do any of the stuff that I previously told them to do. And now they're hitting me up again for more free advice. And I was like, no, I'm not going to jump on another call with you so you can waste my time for a half an hour for me to give you all these pointers and you don't do any of the stuff that we talked about. And then you're going to whine and complain to me 6 months later because, stuff still isn't working. It's like, well, you do any of the stuff that I told you? Well, no, because this thing and that thing, and I have this excuse and this tragedy happened in my life and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, well, don't come to me unless you've actually done the things that I said and they didn't work. If you do the things that I told you to do and then they didn't work and then you come back to me, I'm probably going to jump on another call with you because I feel bad that the advice that I gave you didn't work. But most people won't be helped because they haven't put themselves in a position to be helped. They just want to take. Give me your advice. Give me your mentorship. Give me your feedback. Give me everything. They don't ever want to add anything. They don't want to give anything. They're not value facing. They're only thinking about themselves, and they're not putting themselves in a position to be helped, which is a surefire way to not be helped.
No, it's a great point. I think that most people have to understand networking and getting connected with the right people. Giving is the most important thing you can do. And if you're giving without the idea that you're going to receive, typically you're going to end up getting things back many times over.
Yeah.
And I look at your example with the mentor, and that part of the reason I always sent the questions ahead of time, but also sent afterwards how I followed through, when I showed them I followed through and listened to advice, they wanted to help me more because they
Yep.
actually saw they were having an impact and they felt
Exactly.
they were making a difference, that they were much more open to being able to help me. And I remember early in my career, I was in my 20s, and I got a CIO of a Fortune 300 company to mentor me. And he mentored me for a couple of years, and a large piece of why he continued was I would keep telling him how his advice made a big difference on my impact. But then I go, but I didn't understand how this would. And he'd give me like a little tweak on how to be able to change it. And it made a world of difference in the impact of my career and the trajectory to move up the ranks quickly, because he helped me navigate through stuff that I could have never figured out how to navigate with anybody at my level. He showed me the
Yep.
political side to navigate through, a Fortune 500 company from the executive levels to do it. So when it comes to a podcast, and then we'll wrap up here, a lot of people are listening that would like to start a podcast and think that there's an opportunity that they can either make that into a business or something interesting. Any advice you would give, and this might be self-serving for me to ask you too, any advice you would give on somebody building a podcast from the very beginning?
Yeah, and this dovetails perfectly with what we were just talking about, because I said at the beginning of that answer, you need access, you need proximity. The way that I've gotten access to all the people that I've gotten access to is directly through the podcast that I built. So I recommend everybody start a podcast, not even necessarily for the sake of building an audience or creating content, even though all those things are good, just so that you'll have a vehicle or an excuse to have conversations with people that you normally would just never have a conversation with. Like you and me right now, Jeremy, like if you just reached out and you're like, hey, let's hop on a call to do nothing, I'd be like, probably can't fit that in my schedule because I'm pretty busy right now. But, and it's not because I'm trying to be a dick. It's just because I don't have time to just like jump on random calls with random people for the sake of no goal for happening on the call. Like, but if you have a podcast and you're like, hey, bro, come on my podcast. Now it's like, okay, there's a reason that we're able to connect now. There's an excuse for us to be on a call and build a connection and a relationship over the course of the last half hour or however long we've been having this conversation, because you asked me to come on your podcast. So for me, like a podcast is like the gold mine of business development and high level relationship building. So that being said, my advice around starting a podcast is very similar to what you're already doing, Jeremy, which is basically like, don't focus on the numbers. Don't worry about the audience. Don't worry about any of those things. Use it simply as a tool to develop relationships with the people that you want to develop relationships with the most, regardless of what that may be. If it's in a business context, great. If it's not, doesn't have to be. But start a podcast for the sake of getting in front of the people that you want to get in front of. Build a list, work that list, and communicate directly with those people. And this is exactly why we built Guestio. It's a connection platform. If you don't know where to start, you go to Guestio. There's a ton of free guests on there that you can book directly on your podcast. And there's a bunch of paid guests who are really high quality that take a long time to get a hold of otherwise, that you can pay, that you can bring on your podcast directly. And you can build relationships with those people that way by paying for their time for a podcast episode. If you're doing a good enough job developing that relationship, maybe something can come out of it later. You know what I mean? So for me, it's just all about that. In building a podcast, if you're going to do like an entertainment style or sports style podcast or something way more niche like that, there's a kind of a different set of advice around that. But I assume that the majority of your audience would be business owners and entrepreneurs and people that are looking to, develop their personal brands and things like that. So starting a podcast, that's the core reason of why we teach a bunch of people to start shows. We say, the audience, the downloads, the content, the personal branding, all that stuff is kind of the cherry on top, so to speak. The reason to do it is for the relationships.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, Travis, it's been an awesome conversation. I appreciate you joining here. Where would people find you if they want to find you?
Yeah, you can just go to my website. It's under construction at the moment, but my old site is still up there. But it's travischappell.com, CHAPPELL. And then you can connect me on Guestio as well if you want.
Sweet. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for watching the Upreneur podcast, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share this with anybody who you think needs to hear it.